and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today, she hasn't been in for a while, Gail Fortes, Executive Director of the YWCA of Southeastern Massachusetts. I've always said it YWCA of New Bedford, but
it's Southeastern Massachusetts.
yeah, I know.
But
it's in New Bedford. I've known it in New Bedford
right.
forever, but thanks for coming in.
No, thanks for
it's great
having
seeing
me.
you.
Great to be here.
As
again.
always.
As always. Absolutely.
March, Women's History Month, and I thought bringing Gail in would be an excellent opportunity to sort of talk about where women stand right now. Economically, socially, this is an issue obviously you deal with. This is your mission every day.
Every day.
And you just kind of wonder where we stand, and it's funny, it's among those things where progress has been made, but it's still not where it needs to be. As you look at it, because as you were saying, you've been with the Y now a long time.
A long time, be 30 years next year.
You've seen improvements, but,
yes.
And that's the key word, but.
Exactly.
Where do we stand?
Well, Jim, it's sometimes in some instances I think we're flat. We haven't moved as quickly as we should have. I think we saw a lot of movement a few years ago, and then after COVID and the pandemic, there's just been a lot of changes. And I think the way people and women especially view life, view their careers, view progress, as well as legislation and different things that have come down in different areas, like pay equity, like reproductive health, childcare, housing, has really affected women, and the progress has slowed, but I don't think it's going to stop, because we have a lot of women out there that are like us at the YWCA that are advocating, that we're having conversations, educating people, and having these conversations so that people are aware of things that need to change.
Did the pandemic, and I think the last time you were on was near the start of the pandemic,
yes,
as I recall.
So.
Did the pandemic exacerbate the problems more? I mean, did you have any momentum going into the pandemic, and did that stop the momentum? I
think the pandemic brought to light things that were already there. I think not everyone recognized them. I think, when people, when you went from one day to the next day, and I think even myself, okay, this is going to be over in a couple days or a week, and then all of a sudden everyone's world is turned upside down. So I think being home changed a lot of people, realizing the value of work versus mental health and work-life balance, and understanding what that means, and learning how we can work differently together. I mean, remote work, I think I had done Zoom a couple of times, and now it's you do it every day. I did one before I came here today and do 4 or 5 a day, and just really looking at how we can work more effectively, as well as reevaluating your lives. And I think a lot of women did that, as far as employment, pay equity, childcare, and looking at how they can be happier. Because I think even in the United States, we work hard and tend to play later, versus other countries have a different philosophy, I think, sometimes on that. So I think that work-life balance is important, but then you still have a lot of women during the pandemic, and men too, and youth that were working because they had essential services or jobs, like some of the jobs that we do that have to be done, that can't be done remotely. So I think looking at the value of that, as well as looking at populations that were affected, especially in the areas of insurance and healthcare and pay, and you can really see the disparities that I don't think a lot of people recognized before.
And something like the Y, obviously, because I've known you and your organization for so long, your organization is not a job that is a Zoom job.
No.
You're in the community. You're talking to people, just meeting. You're out there. It's not something that the Y can't exist on the Zoom. It really can't.
No, it can't. I mean, yes, we had maybe some office and different things from home, but we were open. I mean, we have 2 residential programs that provide services to women. So, that's essential. We had to be there. And even some of the clients that maybe couldn't come in, we were doing wellness checks. People, staff were calling them, especially in the beginning. People needed PPE, they needed food, they needed basic services, the student lunches that, because the students were not in school, remote learning. So walking, families through that. And then as soon as we were able to open the childcare, we were open, as soon as we could, for emergency, childcare. So we learned, how to, the word I think was pivot. Everybody was using that time, was to pivot really quickly, and how do we still help our community the best that we can, and we learned a lot, as well, through that whole process.
Why is it still such a struggle, do you think, for women And let's talk. I mean, let's talk pay at the start. I mean, it was interesting. So the Government Accounting Office, and so it's a government agency, and I was looking, and it said women make up about 44% of the total workforce, but only 41% of managers. You've been executive director for a long time, and so you're out
15
there.
15 years, yes.
Why is that figure like that when there's almost half the women are in the workforce and really 3/5 are only in the leadership position?
Right. I think that there's a lot of factors I think that go into it. I think women, some of it is on ourselves. I think we always, doubt ourselves sometimes when you see those positions. Well, I don't know if I can do the job. I don't check every box of every requirement or skill set that's needed, and we don't always challenge ourselves to apply for those positions and put ourselves out there to do that or have a pathway. A lot of times before, I was fortunate that I had a great mentor that was the executive
Did you feel
director.
that way though when you took over? I've known you for a long time.
I did. Even though I had worked there and I thought I knew, but I didn't really know. and I think as executive director, it's still some of the things that you keep to yourself and you shield from staff or just the day-to-day little intricacies of working, because you're working with so many different groups.
Right.
So I think you're working with board members, volunteers, funders, the community. So I think that comes with time and learning and experience too, but I knew that I could do it, and I knew that I didn't know everything, and I was just lucky that I had Yvonne and others that I could call on for guidance. And there's still people that she's still one of the ones that I'll call and say, hey, this is going on, like, what do you think? Just to have a sounding board.
And she's a good sounding.
And
she's a good sounding board.
And she always takes the call, and I think a lot of times you don't have that in organizations. I'm a big firm believer of promoting from within when you can, and providing not just training but just that mentorship and that coaching and those little things. Like she would say, hey, I'm going to this meeting, come with me, and I'm just like nervous and listening, but then you see different things or trainings too. And I think as directors, it's for us to provide those opportunities. And I've been in meetings too that it's just, I think sometimes men just don't feel that way. I think they just think sometimes that, well, I can do it, or they automatically talk to the men in the room or approach them for promotions without looking at all of the candidates.
And there's perceptions too that if a man is tough, he's tough. If a woman is tough,
well, you're being assertive, or
she's
maybe mean or aggressive, or other words that I probably can't use on cable television, right now. And I think sometimes it's still those stereotypes that, well, especially if you have children, or if you're younger, is she going to take time off because now you have the paid family medical leave, which is for anyone. It's not just for women. It could be for men. It could be for any instance too. Or I need to leave work early to pick up a child or do things. And sometimes it might not be said, but there still might be frowned upon. Or you feel like you're missing opportunities, or you're missing that meeting because I don't golf, or I'm not going to go out for drinks afterwards because I have to go home or I have to pick up children. So there's still those little issues that happen, too, because I've heard that, from women that, feel that way, that they miss opportunities because, they can't, go in the bathroom and, when, guys are having that conversation and they miss those opportunities. So again, like sometimes when you do speak up, it's frowned upon, as you said, too.
Pay equity is obviously a huge issue.
Sure is.
Again, from the Government Accounting Office, overall women earned 82 cents for every dollar men earned. Hispanic or Latina women earned about 58 cents, and black women earned about 63 cents for every dollar a white man earned. That is a huge disparity.
It is, and I remember when I first started doing this work for white women was 77 cents. So that's climbed about 5 cents.
In how long?
In more than 10, 15 years too. So I don't know why we still have that disparity. Again, it's looking at salaries, looking at jobs and what's fair and what's equitable, because a lot of times, for the same exact job, and I know in Massachusetts for public sector jobs, we're doing a study on this, with the same experience, same education, all things being equal, the only difference is a man and a woman, and you would see the disparity in the pay, and why is that? And I think it goes back to well, the man needs more because he has to provide for his family. So those old philosophies and those old ways of thinking. But I think now that information is being more public and people are putting salaries on job openings, and I think women, are advocating more, for that, to get rid of those disparities, because it's huge. Then you look at, as you said, the Latina women and black women. I mean, how would you expect to, raise a family, or even as a single person, pay for yourself when you have such a huge disparity? And,
I was going to
why
say,
is that?
Even take out again, for women, 82 cents versus the dollar, that's a closer gap than the Latina or the black woman experience. I mean, that's a huge 82 gap. Cents is still significantly more than the other two.
Exactly, and it's for every job. It can be from the $15 an hour job to a top private CEO making $1 million, because I've had conversations with women that run private companies, and yes, they feel like, well, I'm not going to complain because I'm making $500,000, but my male counterpart is making $750,000. So I think, again, they feel that they shouldn't say anything because they have a great salary, but it's still, again, but why is it still not the same as a man is making for the same exact job? So I think we have to have people be accountable, to that, and look at our policies and regulations. And I think, again, the pandemic has brought that to light, because you've seen, of course, inflation going higher, all of our bills more, including just your basic needs, food, I'm sure you've paid that electric bill, gas bill. All of those things are expensive, and then the pays need to go up, because you're even on $15 an hour, you have adults making that, and our teenagers coming in working at the YWCA making the $15 an hour. So how are you going to
and those jobs, the $15 an hour jobs, were the jobs that you and I had.
Right, I think we're probably making 7 or 8 at that time.
Right. I mean, it's just those are the
entry
jobs,
level,
right? And they're good, they're fine, but they're not. I don't want to say a living wage, but they're good for a kid who's 20, an 18-year-old kid who's just starting out.
Exactly, and then I think that's what that should be. And then even though we continue to raise it, there's still, a disparity, in the wages. So I think, having those studies and really looking at, but yes, you have this information, but then what are you going to do with it? It goes back to the organizations to really internally look at that, and for when you're interviewing people, because everywhere you look, people are hiring, and I think pay equity is a big piece of that.
Well, and salaries, at least again on the surface, salaries are higher now.
Oh yes.
Than they were pre-pandemic, because they're looking for people, but it still seems as though that you still have that disparity for women and women of color.
Yes, we do. And we've been advocating for this for, like I said, for years, and it's, again, going back to the employers when they're looking at that, and what is the reason? As for anyone that comes in, if this is a salary, it should be the same, no matter who the person is that you're hiring for the job.
You would think, yeah.
So it's having those conversations as to why are you offering, like you said, the white woman, 82 cents versus, 59 cents for the other person of color, and what is their rationale for that? With all things, again, being equal.
So the gender pay gap also varied by level of education, was greatest for women with less than a high school diploma or equivalent, and was smallest for women with a bachelor's degree. Now, on the surface, that's usually kind of like, as you and I were talking off camera, that's usually kind of like that in general male, standard. Female, or whatever.
Right, exactly.
But as you said, it's exacerbated by the figures that we just talked about earlier.
Exactly, because you're still seeing, those disparities, even with, as you said, high school diploma. A lot of employers are not looking for that anymore. Like, you need something more. Even associates, even a bachelor's at some point might not be enough. You might, want employers, want people with a master's degree, even if it's not in that field sometimes, or provide the training, and you're looking for that. But again, you're still seeing that disparity, even, again, all things being equal, people with undergrad or graduate degrees are still not being paid the same. So even PhDs, I've heard that from other people.
Really?
With even PhDs, again, not being paid fairly and equitably when they have, again, the education, and they went years and years of school for that.
Do you see girls wanting to go to college? Do they have the opportunity? And obviously affordability is a huge issue, but
of course
and all families are going through that, although obviously if you're getting 58 cents on the dollar, you're limited in going to school. But do you see that girls want to go to school?
I think so, and I think last time I looked at the rates, more women and girls were going to college than even men, at the time. And I think it's having those pathways, and it's having people introduce that to them, as well as non-traditional roles, because there's so many opportunities here. Like, as we're seeing, in New Bedford now with South Coast Wind and other types of jobs, and there's people looking for all types of, work in the workforce. but are they given that opportunity? Do they know about scholarships? Do they know about financial aid? I mean, I don't know about you, but filling out that FAFSA was challenging. Even for me as a parent.
You actually need a degree for the FAFSA form, the financial aid form.
It's like, wow. So how do people that
I had my wife do that
without even assistance or help? And it brings it back to the assistance. But I think it goes back to again, whether it's the family or a trusted friend or the guidance counselors does everybody have the opportunity? And I think it's about access, to that. And I think depends on, again, your situation. Because a lot of the girls I know we work with, they might be the first ones or second ones going to school. And it shouldn't be a barrier because of finances.
And you see that a lot in this area.
In this area. I've talked with so many, that haven't. And they don't even know about financial aid or, again, scholarships. There's so many scholarships out there. Again, going through it last year with, my second daughter, again, reminds you of, again, that's not easy, to do. And sometimes you have to be on them a little bit about, getting the information and getting it in on time and writing the essays and recommendations. Again, it's having access, to the information and help when you need it, because I think a lot of it is they don't know what to do. Even though, you think they're 17 or 18 and they're teenagers, sometimes you still need assistance to complete that information.
Well, again, as 17 and 18, and as a parent, you don't know anything. And
oh no, they don't want. Somebody else can help.
Exactly.
They don't want mom or dad to help.
I thought this was interesting. Occupational segregation has contributed to a slower recovery for some women. Clustering of women in just a few occupations. And I was thinking of that. I'm like, when I was a kid, most of my teachers were women.
Women, right.
It obviously doesn't seem like that now as much.
Right, more men, but I think it's still a lot of women.
But so, do you see that as like that women only really have certain jobs and that's pretty much it?
I think that's what they think, and I think that's what a lot of people believe. But I think, again, giving opportunity and information, again, and talking with some of the girls even in our programs, they didn't even know that these other jobs existed or these fields of study, because again, they were never told about it. So like, you hear the stats about the rates of math and science, for girls is less than, for boys. But there's so many other fields and what you could do with that degree and these other jobs. So I think mentoring programs, shadowing programs, so that they can understand what these other jobs are. I mean, and I'll give the flip side of that, like childcare. A lot of, again, very, for women a lot. And we have 2 young men that work in our childcare program, and the kids love it. Yeah. Love it. Because for them, a lot of them, they don't have a positive male role model. They're in single, parent homes. There's not a man around, so to have a 17-year-old boy out there playing hoops with them, and somebody that they can talk to. And I was over watching some of them, and he was like, oh, can you show me how to, like, that tie is really nice. Can you show me how to tie a tie? And the women are like, well, I don't know how to do that too. So, I mean, I think the flip side is too that it's okay for, a man to work in a child care or to be, I have a nephew that's a teacher, and I'm like, that is so great to see a young man and a man of color as a teacher. Right. And then you can see someone that looks like you is important. So I think the same thing for women, to see, a woman, why can't you be the doctor versus the nurse? I thought
it was cool
get in those fields.
For the Super Bowl that the, I don't know if you
the pilots were all women.
Were all women. It was, and I know they had a huge piece that I saw on it. That was really cool to see.
Right. And it is cool, and I think, again, it's showing those role models. Like when we had, I know at one of the schools here, they had the female astronaut come. I think it was last year or a couple of years ago. Wow, to be an astronaut, like you don't see a lot of women, or a captain of a ship, or whether it's police department, fire department. There's so many other jobs that that are out there that just, again, if people know about it and see people that are doing that, and the people that are doing those jobs are out there and talking about it so that people know.
The captain of the Ernestina.
Yes, a ship. Oh.
And it's funny, I remember interviewing her, and we had a good conversation for 10, 15 minutes, and then another reporter said, being a woman, and I said, I apologize. I mean, I never even, didn't even bat an eyelash. Then again, I've got 2 daughters in my family, so it's like, it really didn't register with me, but it's like, oh yeah, you are a woman doing that job.
Exactly.
I mean, she's like, she was happy I didn't mention it, because she's like, no, I can do the job.
Right.
But that was really cool to see that ship, and she's in charge.
And again, I mean, when you think back and the progress we've made, like women in leadership, women in politics, women even here, in our city, the number of, I remember when there was one woman on the city council or one on the school committee. Again, knowing that you can run for office, and be a part of those processes, I think I only know one woman that runs a bank, locally, in our community too. I mean, again, having those jobs, but when you go in, you see mostly women, behind the desks. So again, thinking about those opportunities, and then what is the pathways for growth and to move up.
We've touched on childcare, but that seems to be really a huge issue. First of all, the lack of childcare available.
Yes, there's never enough.
Because the pandemic certainly closed a lot of places.
It did.
And the availability, it does hurt women's ability to get a job, never mind move up.
No, it doesn't. I think having childcare that's open, non-traditional hours sometimes is not available, because not all jobs are 9 to 5.
Right.
As we all know. So I know that's things that we've heard even from our families. Wait lists if you are waiting, for a slot or a voucher, if you're low income, is tough. And as you said, during the pandemic, especially some of the in-home providers for, family daycares, like for infants and toddlers, closed because they just couldn't survive. Too, and some of the bigger child cares, we don't provide infant and toddler. I've thought about it, but we're more of a school-aged, base. But even for us, it took a while to get those numbers back up, because a lot of moms were either working from home and they didn't need the child care or couldn't afford, to pay for that, or transportation. We provide transportation, which is a huge expense that we're not passing on, to the families. But sometimes, it's not everybody can get out of work at 2:00 or 2:30 to go pick up a child and bring them home, or bring them to, grandparents' house or whatever they're going to be able to do. So having that after school care and being open, to 6 o'clock-ish, is important. That's one of the changes that we made to accommodate, some of the families.
And even the cost of child care
went up.
If you're able to get in, the cost is really tough.
It is tough, and that's why I think a lot of families chose to either work from home or even to not work, because you're working to pay for childcare, especially if you have, again, children under 5 and you have more than one. A good part of your salary is going towards childcare. So I think you have to weigh the pros and cons.
Is there any, and I know they talk about that, the legislature's talking about that, providing aid. I would think the first step is you've got to get more child care providers.
Right, and again,
never mind costs. You need to get people to do it.
You need more providers. For us, we're a licensed program, through the state, so there's a lot of expense, that goes with that, because you want to make sure you're following all the rules and regulations. You use a certain curriculum, staff training, and the reimbursement rate isn't a lot. It doesn't cover, all the costs, as well as the staff are low paid. Again, that's still a low paid job. So it's the pay equity on the flip side of it, that if the state is going to fund, or even if it's private paid, are we really paying you're asking them almost to do like teaching in some instances. It's not just, babysitting. So I think if you're going to increase those regulations, then the pay equity or the reimbursement rate, as an example, that we're receiving, needs to be higher as well, because it is a lot, to pay for childcare, and that's across the board.
Right.
Even for teachers.
Right. Housing, you touched on that. So many. You hear it here in New Bedford. The rents have just gone through the roof. And I know that the mayor has said that they're trying to work on a plan.
Yes.
The hard thing is, the reality is, it's capitalism. It's supply and demand, and people can do it. But so, talk about those challenges right now, because that's something you're dealing with every day. We do.
Jim, we get calls every day. We provide residential services for low-income women, single women only, congregate living. We have 2 programs, so 15 units total. We just, the last week of February, purchased our 3rd property.
Oh, did you?
It was formerly the Elizabeth's House on County Street, which will have 12 units.
Because I know we did the ribbon cutting for the first one, and we got the tour in there.
So
Beautiful building.
So we'll be having a ribbon cutting at some point. And it had 2 residents in that we kept. We made a promise to that. We were not going to displace anyone, because we've seen that, already in our city. We've seen, other people come in and buy properties and either, tear them down. And, when our board looked at this was part of our strategic plan, and we did, a housing study. We talked to a lot of people. We looked at, what the city had said. As we see that there's a housing crisis, as we all know, even for people that can't afford it. Rents went up from, the landlord changes, and now your $800 went to $1,200, but your pay hasn't changed, or might have changed a little bit, but now you don't have that disposable income, and you're seeing that all across the board. You're seeing that across the city, whether it's for apartments,
Seeing it
or
everywhere,
for
really.
houses.
Yeah.
It's everywhere, and there's not a lot of housing stock.
No.
I mean, people will go and look at an apartment. I mean, and it's really the landlord can pick whoever really they want. Or people are pairing up. I mean, and again, with our residential program, the goal is for eventually, for them to move out to their own apartment with supportive services. And, again, $1,000, $1,200 to live in a very small, maybe not the greatest area. And again, and then first, last, and security, they can't afford that. So, so they're staying longer, with us, which is fine. But then it doesn't have that slot for someone else that wants to come in. So, I mean, we know that we didn't want to build from the ground up. We wanted to look at something that was here in the city. As we all know, there's a lot of properties that I drive by that like we've seen with some of, Wamsetta and some of the other places. But, it takes time, to do that. I know from
money.
Money. I mean, it took us 10 years to do our project at $4.5 billion. So, I mean, to do these huge projects takes years and money and tax credits, and it's very complicated that I don't think everybody really realizes until you do one, how tough it is. But we know that there's just not enough affordable housing for anyone, but especially for people on low income. Seniors, we're seeing a lot of that, senior citizens.
And no, I don't think people, I mean, we've talked about childcare, but women retarees that are on their own, or
we see it a lot.
Food insecurity.
Food insecurity. We've run a program for widows, and it's a big difference going from a couple to single. And if you're getting just Social Security or disability, you still lost an income. As well as women that are don't have a partner or divorced. I mean, it's very challenging without being able to find that, or they're working longer because they can't afford to retire, as well. So that's a whole nother spectrum that women are working in their 70s. Or even a part-time job because they don't have enough to make ends meet. And so then I can't pay this pill, I can't take this pill right now, I can only take one instead of taking 2 pills. So they're making health decisions now based on that, which shouldn't happen in 2023.
We got a minute left, and I'm just kind of curious with all we've talked about. Are you optimistic? I mean, we've got a new governor, first female governor, who's hit the ground running, it seems. Do you expect anything even small in the next year or so that makes life a little easier for women?
I hope so. I try to always be hopeful because it's been a lot of troubling things over the last year. Reproductive health, as we know, there's which we didn't get to talk about, but that's something we've really been talking about, and not just whether you're pro-choice or not. It's just about family planning and all the other issues that go on with healthcare. Is a huge disparity. So I am hopeful with the new administration, and not that the other one was bad, not at all, but I think there's just so many challenges, and I think women's voices need to be heard. We need to have these discussions, and we really need to look at them not just broadly, but just right here in New Bedford, because it could get worse, too. And I'm hopeful that it does pick up and it does get better, but sometimes you see there's a lot of money flowing with different things, and I'm always worried, like, okay, when is the bottom going to fall out? Is there going to be a recession? And then is it going to be more harmful? And the pockets that it usually happens to is usually women, seniors, people of color that get affected. So, but I'm always optimistic.
You are. That's true. For people who have questions, want to chat, how can they get in touch with you?
You can call the YWCA, 508-999-3255, or check out our website, www.ywcasema.org.
Lots of info on that, too.
Lots of info, yep. You can find out all about our programs, and our info email is on there as well.
It's great seeing you.
All right.
Thanks for coming in. That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.